Hey, what's going on? It's Stephen Platinum, and I'm taking a look at the AEW Dark show that showed up on, what are we in May? May 19th of 2020. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down what I thought of each match and a couple of things along the way. And then I'll put up this audio with time markers so that way if people just want to listen to what I thought about one particular match or person in the match, they can just skip ahead to that instead of breaking it up like I do for the raw things and like I'm going to do for AEW Dynamite. Great. So we open the show. Excalibur and Taz are going to be the commentators, which is fine with me. I like two commentators better than three. I think three tends to get really muddy. Excalibur to me is a pretty good commentator. Taz has highs and lows, man. When he's brilliant, he's brilliant. When he gets sidetracked with some goofy crap or says something dumb, it sucks. But Taz overall, I'll give it this. He has really great moments, which I will definitely take. I do wish AEW Dark had some kind of open, even if it was something that sort of encapsulated the dark thing. Nothing complicated, just something where it's like it went from light to dark, and then we saw the AEW Dark logo with some kind of sound, some kind of resonant sound would be more than adequate. Just something to say, hey, you're looking at a TV show. I think it's fine that it's on YouTube, and it's fine that it's sort of stripped down to what it is. In fact, that's one of the appeals of the show to me. But, a little bit of production, I think, would go a long, long way. Speaking of a little going a long way, we have our first match, Danny Jordan against Hikaru Shida. The ring announcer, by the way, I thought did a stellar job. And again, a couple of graphics thrown up about who's who and what's what. When we have the ring announcer shown, just throw her name up there just for a little bit. Small stuff, but again, we want to get to know your people. When we have a referee, the commentators did a great job of telling us who the referee was. It was cool to see Mike Posey in a couple of these matches, by the way. Danny Jordan comes out. That burn book. Danny, we got to talk about the burn book. Get something that stands up. I thought it was cool that she put the burn book there to really put the gimmick over, but when she did it as she entered the ring at the top of the ramp, and then once she put it in the corner, she's having to spend more time going like, hope this thing stays up. Just fucking get a book and wrap it. Cool. Boom. I really liked that she made a thing out of the burn book. I like that she's beginning to find ways to stand out. And the commentators have the same stuff that they talked about the last time that she made an appearance. I get that they're probably doing a bunch of these tapings at once. I get that reality. But boy, I wish they would say different things about her besides the fact that she played soccer and la 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 la. The match itself, I thought the shoulder tackle exchange at the beginning was really interesting way to start the match, and it was really different. One thing was, and again, this is just me being a little bit of an old school nitpicky guy, that Hikaru the way she wrestled tended to come across as really, really heelish. One thing I like about her is that smile that she constantly puts out. It really does sort of engage and separate her. And plus her outfits are amongst the best of any wrestling woman. Danny Jordan's got her look, and it really works for her. Her wrestling is solid, but not spectacular. I would suggest that she develop some kind of signature bump and signature thing that really puts across the mean girl thing. What do I mean by that? If you're going to be the mean girl, then I need something where we can have that further cemented in our minds besides just the burn book. Facial expressions, something where you're ripping and tearing at the facial features of somebody else. Something that just says that swagger of the implication of mean is the implication of viciousness and cruelty for cruelty's sake. You have to embody the gimmick in what you do and how you do it. We had a very nice sort of pendulum DDT that I really, really liked. The Dani Jordan hit. That was probably my favorite spot for her in the match. And at the end, we had a knee strike and a Falcon's Arrow by Hikaru, which I thought was very effective. Again, not a spectacular match. It wasn't really meant to be. It was a good showcase for Dani, but we want to definitely bring in some of those mean girl elements to her ring work. Cool. I'm just writing down where we're at for time cues. Okay. So, Clutch Adams against QT Marshall is match number 2. What did I like? I liked that QT Marshall had the taped ribs. In the promo that they had on Dynamite, or no, on the, actually it was on the Road to Double or Nothing, where he had the vignette with Diamond Dallas Page, which I liked a lot, where they talked through the glass at the house on their phones. Diamond Dallas Page gave him 2 bits of advice, and again, I would have loved to see this incorporated. They could have played the vignette before this match, or the commentators could have mentioned it. Again, small stuff. Yeah, I want to connect all of these things that AEW does, whether it's a Road to special, the Dynamite show, or old episodes of Dark, whatever. They need somebody there to catch these continuity things, to make sure it really everything works in lockstep with each other. Just my opinion. But QT Marshall came out with the taped ribs, which is great. It gave Clutch Adams, who was a first-time appearance here, something to focus on and get to tell a story in the match. There really wasn't a lot to the match. I did like that they continually went back to the ribs. QT Marshall, of course, a consummate pro. His punches look phenomenal. And again, I just can't emphasize this enough. It's when you do things like strikes, or even how you apply a headlock correctly, or in an interesting way, or in a very efficiently, perfectly done way, like QT did here with his punches. It just really stands out. And that's something especially for the guys who aren't necessarily under contract and trying to get a gig. Do your stuff perfectly. Keep it simple and do it perfectly. And then when you have a chance to stand out, really nail that opportunity. We're going to talk about somebody who I think did that later on in their match. But the 2 things that came out of the DDP promo were, tape your ribs, bro. And then the other one was, you got to come up with a finisher. It'll change your life. And then so QT, I was really curious, since I saw his ribs were taped. I'm like, oh, he's going to come up with this great new finisher. And then it ended up being Cutter, which is fine, I guess. I was hoping they would come up with something original, but I also get that, it's hard to reinvent the wheel, right? Cool. So we go on to match number 3. We got Jason Cade and Marko Stunt. So I haven't seen Marko Stunt really wrestle a match where he wasn't getting absolutely demolished and thrown around. I was curious to see what he would do when he got a chance to showcase his stuff a little more. And I gotta say something, I was not fucking disappointed. When I looked up Marko Stunt matches before, I kind of thought like, oh, he's a guy who wrestles like Davey Richards, except he's really tiny. And I thought that was really shitty. But he showcased stuff here. From the 450 finisher to his toughness of, Jason Cade at one point clipped him and he was bleeding from the nose, and the commentators made a big deal about that. And Marko really incorporated that into his match incredibly well. If this was a work, I don't care. It was an incredibly done one, and I don't suspect it was a work, but it looked phenomenal. The Poison Rana perfectly laid. That's one thing. Marko Stunt executes his offense flawlessly. And he actually did something that I've never really seen before, and it was really cool, which is he did this knee strike that came across as like an uppercut. So as he was coming in for the knee strike, he like dipped his knee down and looked like he was catching the guy underneath his chin looked great. Jason Cade did a great job selling. He definitely made a great base for Marko's stunt and all the stuff that he was doing. I also loved post-match. Now, he probably really had to do it, but Marko Stunt laid out and a doctor checked him, and they filmed that, and I thought it was a great look. It was a great outing for Marko Stunt, and it certainly makes the match with he and MJF that's coming up today on Dynamite a much more interesting prospect. So I think, just winning all around. Let's go to match 4. Match 4, we've got Musa and Lee Johnson, who have worked a few times as a team in AEW, against Jimmy Havoc and Kip Sabian, with Penelope Ford at ringside. God bless her. The thing that stood out the most was the nice contrast between Jimmy Havoc and Kip Sabian. Kip Sabian comes in and he's wrestling all over the place, doing great little wrestling exchanges. And then Jimmy Havoc comes in and just brawls. And I thought it was such a nice thing to see a contrast, because if there's one thing the tag teams in AEW often suffer from, it's same. The Young Bucks, same, right? The Party Guys, same. Very similar wrestling styles. It is nice to have an old school contrast in styles. The basics looked good for Musa and Lee Johnson. Yeah. The field goal kicking spot by Havoc and Kip Sabian is something they should always do, where Jimmy Havoc snapmares them and then puts his finger on top of their head, and then Kip Sabian comes and kicks their head like it's a football. It's phenomenal. It's the kind of thing that I wish I would see more of, because it wasn't this spectacular, overly intricate tag thing. The other tag match on this thing, I'm gonna chide them a lot for that, where there were these sort of intricate things that would go one into another, where you just got lost and the wrestlers themselves looked like they got lost and it looked like shit. Whereas this was a simple thing that you could tell it was great because they did a replay on it. And then the finisher looked really good. When the match had the breakdown part near the end, it looked like it was a legit breakdown where it was a little messy. But at the end of the day, I suspect that Kip Sabian really got hurt, and so Jimmy Havoc just had to carry the finish, which he did. He's a real pro. I'm a big Jimmy Havoc fan. I saw him at an MLW show. I really like him, and the ripcord clothesline that he does looks great. That weird thing where he hooks the leg like a fisherman suplex, but then he brings you up and DDTs you. It just looks very efficient, very solid stuff all around, and a great cover at the end by Jimmy Havoc. All right. So, sorry, I'm just marking times just to make sure I can just do this in one fell swoop. We got Shawn, Dean, and Fenix. And I'm not going to lie, this is the match I was looking forward to the most, besides the kind of dual appearances by Snake Man and Jon Cruz. But Shawn Dean is, I think, the guy who has the best chance of getting signed out of all of this. And I don't want anybody else to take that as an insult who's trying to get signed, especially Allin Angels, who I think has had a number of really great showings. But Shawn Dean, to me, is the closest one to being ready for this kind of thing. He's cleaned up his entrance, and it's very clean and easy to remember. The saluting thing is great. He did everything very solidly. He was a great base for Fenix. And when he had his opportunity to really show out, and he did that crazy dive, that somersault dive that almost went, Fenix had to catch him, and people would say like, oh, see, but the commitment to the size of the move, put it this way, he's the only guy who wasn't under contract who had their spot replayed because it was so over the top and spectacular. His facial expressions for what they were great, but I think he's even got to get bigger and more emotional and more fired up. And then Fenix hit that finisher of his, which is really great, which is like a muscle buster that he twists into a drop and a pin. that really comes across really well. I'm not giving a lot of time to this because I'm just pointing out mostly the stuff that Shawn Dean did really well. Again, I just feel he's the closest and he just needs small stuff, but he really gets it. And he's had the good fortune of working with a wide variety of different kind of guys, Colt Cabana and then Fenix. Awesome. Match 6, Jon Cruz, big fan, against Luther, who's been around forever and a day. I think I have some books about like Canadian, like this small Indian Canada that did these really great photographs, and Luther was a big star there. So I was really curious to see what Luther would do. And Luther is a guy to look at because he's a guy who just works that gimmick tirelessly, and he's going to stand out no matter what. His ring stuff, nothing spectacular, but it all fits within the context of his gimmick. Even his finisher, where he puts the guy in a camel clutch, but then just rips at his face, and Jon Cruz played everything just right. He tapped out right away. He didn't do this holdout thing. He, made Luther look like this kind of serial killer monster. He played emotions at just the right time. All his spots were very clean. Just Jon Cruz is one of those guys that you want to work with, and he just does things so freaking well. The one thing for Jon Cruz I'll say is, and his challenge is, how do you go from being a good hand to something spectacular? How do you get them to not see you as just a good hand? Because he's got all the tools in place, but it feels like he doesn't have that thing. Now, when he's Serpentico and whatnot, of course, he's got that. But as Jon Cruz, I feel like he needs to really dig down deep and find ways to stand out as more than just a good hand. Again, this might seem really harsh, but it's because I believe in Jon Cruz, and I don't feel that he should be relegated to just being a good hand, because he's much more than that, and I want people to know that. All right, so now we're going on to the next match, which is, sorry, I had to go with my notes all over the frickin' place. There we go. Ryan Rembrant and Mike Reed versus Private Party. I'm a Mike Reed guy. I'm just going to say that. I'm biased. I think Mike Reed's really great. I think whenever they use him in any kind of role, whether it's a doctor or there's security or some kind of thing on various shows, he always does a really good job. I think he's a very smart guy who's clearly been doing this for a while. This match, this tag match with Private Party, I hated. I think it was my least favorite match by miles on this thing. I just found it really sloppy, and people might want to put that on Ryan Rembrant since he was in the ring most of the time with Private Party. I just felt like nothing connected. It's not that Private Party doesn't work their gimmick. They most certainly do. It's just the in-ring with like spot after spot after spot where it just comes across as really sloppy and choreographed. And if you especially that one spot where they're going to hit Ryan Rembrant and he was supposed to come up in a wheelbarrow position with Mike Reed, and then he was going to run off the back of Ryan Rembrant and hit Mike Reed, and it was a mess. And some guys would put that on Rembrant and Reed. I don't. I just think it was a horribly conceived spot. Maybe they've pulled it off before with other people or whatever, but it just comes across as really lame and weak. For Private Party, and I normally I don't give advice for the contracted guys, but I would say doing more things in unison instead of me, then you, then me, then you would serve you better, and it would help you get into the groove, and more importantly, help the team that you're facing get into a groove of doing stereo spots until you find your groove, and then you go into the sort of more complicated catch as catch can, one move after another kind of stuff. Just my opinion. Mike Reed, though, really good showing again. Ryan Rembrant needs to find ways to stand out. He just does. But Mike Reed knows what the game is, which is, being hitting your marks, but more than that, like coming up with appropriate facial expressions, when you have your moments, making yourself stand out, engaging, all that kind of stuff. Mike Reed's got all of those tools. No doubt about it. So yeah, it's a tag match. I thought it was far inferior, even though they had a snafu in the other match. This one just felt messier, and honestly, I had a hard time. It lost my interest. I mean, I focused on it for this, but I just wasn't into it. Allin Angels and Sammy Guevara, really great wrestling match. Allin Angels, again, the commentators seem to be very high on Allin Angels. As they did for him what they did for a couple of others, which is like, he's got all the tools, he just needs to put a win together, which is a nice story to set up if they're going to give Allin Angels a win, but they clearly weren't here. So I think the commentators are damning with faint praise. Again, a very good match. But you're going to have very good matches with Sammy Guevara, who's one of these guys who knows how to give a lot in matches but still get himself over. Sammy Guevara is clearly a guy who's learned to sort of put it together and is ready for true superstardom, though I don't think it should happen for a while. I think he'll be very ready for when it actually happens. Just give me one. Well, wait. I figured out that I can hit pause on this. Let me pause. It'll only take like 4 minutes. Okay. So, hey. So I had a pause right there and then finish this elsewhere. If there's a little bit of echo, it's because of where I'm recording. So Allin Angels against Sammy Guevara, like I said, I thought a perfectly good match. Very serviceable, made Allin Angels look good, but Sammy knows how to get himself over while giving up a lot of offense to Allin Angels. A couple of the spots that I thought Allin Angels did in the Kenny Omega match, I didn't see here again. And I guess that's okay, but the stuff that he did that was really creative, I would have loved to see that be a part of Allin Angels' deal, where he uses the ring in a clever way against his opponent. I think that's something that he should really latch onto. Yeah. So that's what I got to say about that. And now, our last one. Serpentico, who did his whole entrance, including the streamers and all of that stuff. I saw Serpentico recently at a show. God, they had a really weird name. Really artsy show. But Serpentico did the same entrance, which I think is really good, really spectacular. Certainly the commentators made note of that he used the streamers. And he's wrestling Sammy Guevara in the de facto main event. Darby Allin. I think the commentators do a bit of a disservice when they imply that the people coming from the outside who are not contracted, they're just about, they just need a big break and get a win and they could be right here. Because I'll just be bluntly honest, Darby Allin, and to a lesser extent Sammy Guevara, but really Darby Allin is showing that he is like a star. There's a quality that he has. There's an energy and a fire that he had in his match. They sort of noted that, him doing the coffin drop to the outside of the ring in a match on AEW Dark was a little crazy, but I think that's part of his deal. And then, he Serpentico, aka Jon Cruz in a mask, really put on the best job working with his guy to put him over. Meaning, he was a great base, because Darby Allin was all over the place. And Darby Allin's offense can be kind of herky-jerky at times, but you would have known it. I thought Serpentico did a really great job being a base for him, making him look good. When he had a chance at his offense, he definitely got his stuff in, no doubt. But his job was to look like a competitor to Darby Allin, but ultimately take all of Darby Allin's spots and make them as great as possible. And he certainly did that. And then when you had that last supper, that weird leg lock that goes into a roll-up finish. And that's all she wrote. So that was and then they had a bunch of promos. Again, I like that AEW is on top of their shit, man. They went over at least 5 or 6 things that were happening on Dynamite and then briefly glossed over the card that's happening on Saturday for Double or Nothing. Just a really solid output. The show was very long. I mean, it was like an hour and 20 minutes. And for a YouTube show with limited production value, where it's basically non-competitive matches for the most part as a showcase, 9 is fucking insane. And now they've done it 2 weeks in a row after having a show where they had 2. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. And I think it's great that they're doing all of these matches. Just a little balance, motherfuckers. 4 or 5 is wonderful. Certainly if you had 4 matches capped off by the Allin Angel Sammy Guevara, and then you had 5 more matches capped off by Serpentico and Darby Allin, I think you're all set there. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening, and I'll get this up right now, baby.